There we go. Welcome, everyone. This is Paul Skowinski, the president of the chapter. Thanks for joining us today. We have Tony Iwani here to teach us all about iNaturalist. I have a very quick update to do, and then we'll turn it over to Tony here for about 45 minutes this evening. So the update I wanted to give was about the Piffner Park planting that is coming up. You probably saw an email from me or two in the last week or two asking for help with this garden. We have 5 to 8 volunteers for each shift coming up on Thursday. So we're looking pretty good there. We have about 1,200 plants to put in. And this is, again, a shoreline planting along the Green Circle Trail at Piffner Park between the river and the trail. So if you are not one of the volunteers that are helping out on Thursday, make sure you check it out throughout the summer to see how it's going. We've got some aluminum signage that should be here tomorrow, I believe, that we'll be putting up, and a lot of plants going into that site. So it'll be a very visible site for us to demonstrate the power of native plants along the shoreline for erosion control and aesthetics and other reasons. That's all I wanted to update on. I wanted to leave most of the meeting for Tony here. So Tony is the outreach and community coordinator for iNaturalist out of California. And I will stop sharing here, Tony, and let you take it away.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, I'm Tony Iwani. I'm iNaturalist Outreach and Community Coordinator. I've been using iNat since it started. I've been lucky enough to be friends with Kenichi Ueda, who was the co-founder of iNat. So it's been part of my life for since 2008. And I just love sharing iNaturalist with others. So I should talk about 45 minutes. I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. I might go a little longer, but I guess we'll see. And let's see here. Let me just turn on my laser pointer. All right. So basically, this will break down into a quick introduction to what iNaturalist is. And then I'm going to talk about our computer vision suggestion model and how that's used for suggesting identifications. I'm then going to talk about iNaturalist data and how the data submitted to iNaturalist can be used or have been used in research and in other ways. And then I'm going to share my screen and show you how to use our app and a few things about our website. And then, like I said, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And without further ado, let me just take it away. So iNat, I should also note that we are a joint initiative of the California Academy of Sciences and the National Geographic Society. So those are kind of our two main institutional partners. And we're very grateful for the support. So what we are is we're a global platform and a social network where any member of iNaturalist can share their observations of any wild organisms. And any other member can add identifications or comments to those observations. And these observation data are open to everyone to look at on our website and our app, or to download if they want to. There are some caveats as far as location. We obscure the locations of threatened species, and you can also obscure or make private the locations of any of your observations. So for instance, I obscure observations I make around my house. But that part's up to you. Now, what iNaturalist is not, it's not really what you traditionally think of as citizen science. A lot of people call it a citizen science platform. It can be used for citizen science. So kind of traditionally, we think of citizen science as sort of a top-down thing, right? There's some researchers, they have a research question, but in order to obtain the data they need, they recruit quote unquote non-scientists, members of the public, and ask them to contribute data. So something like the Zombie Watch project, where they are interested in bees that are being basically zombified by a certain parasite. They want people to contribute the observations. That's like to answer a specific question. And often it's pretty complicated, although sometimes it's more simple. iNaturalist can be used as a way to, as by researchers for citizen science to be like, okay, we are interested in these plants in this area, or we're interested in if you find any of, these insects. Please report to iNaturalist. We have a little project where we can collate those observations. But in general use, iNat is about people just being curious and wanting to share and discuss nature. So we're interested actually in facilitating a lifestyle of data collection. So not just like a discrete project, but we are hoping that sharing your observations of wild organisms and helping and discussing them with others is a self-interested sort of thing, kind of a hobby. We want this to be part of your life. And so we're not just a data repository. A lot of people will have maybe institutional spreadsheets with decades of data contributed by volunteers. And that's not really what iNat's about. There are other places for a data repository. We want this to be your personal experience of nature that you want to share. And the data are generated from that sharing and that discussion. And I should just note that iNat is for people of any experience or interest level. So if you're just kind of a casual, if you have a casual interest in nature or just beginning interest, that's great. We also have world experts on iNaturalist, which is kind of amazing. And then everyone in between. So on iNaturalist, the observation is kind of the cornerstone of everything. Okay, so an observation, the way we define it, is it records an encounter between a human and a wild organism or recent evidence of a wild organism. So that could be tracks, it could be scat, it could be a beaver chew, it could be I've iNatted my Portuguese man-o-war sting in Hawaii. Anything that kind of shows that an organism has been there can be the subject of an observation, and that encounter takes place at a specific time and place. So, for example, here is a rattlesnake observation I made a few years ago that I like to use as an example. So what we have here is media evidence of what I encountered. So I have a few photos of the rattlesnake that I took. So that means that someone can actually evaluate what it is, the evidence that I have for this observation. There is a location and a time and a date in this area. So you can see exactly where I saw it. You can see what's been seen around, if there's others of the species that have been seen around it. And you can see when I saw it. And those are kind of the main parts of an observation: evidence, date, and location. And time is helpful too, but we definitely just need a date. I can write a little note, and I wrote a little note here. I added an identification. I said, I'm pretty sure this is a Northern Pacific rattlesnake. And then below that, in the activity section, people can add other IDs. They could agree with me, they could disagree, they could write comments or questions. And maybe if I was wrong, they could say, actually, this is, snake X because of, Y and Z, and here's a link to a source for that. And, I could change my mind and actually change my identification. And you can see that there's a community taxon that reflects what the entire community has added as far as identification. So 5 out of 5 people have added an ID of Northern Pacific rattlesnake. So that seems pretty solid. And you can also annotate things like life stage, sex, etc. So that's kind of your basic observation. Media evidence, when and where you saw it, and what you think it is. And I'm going to be emphasizing this a few times throughout my talk, but iNat is really about community, and it's really about discussion. I like to think of every observation as the start of a discussion. So I say, here's what I saw, here's where I saw it, when I saw it, here's what I think it is. And then, like I said, other people can actually join in on that discussion. So here's just an example I picked at random today. Someone photographed a snail. They added an identification. They think, okay, I think it's this great pond snail. Someone else chimed in and said, you know what, I think it's in this family because of X, Y, and Z. And they gave a description and they linked to it. And they say it's possibly something else, but it's very difficult to identify it from this photo. And so they can only identify it to the family level, not to species. And the other person is read that and they were convinced by that argument, and they removed their original ID of a snail species and agreed with the family level ID and thanked them. So this is kind of like, I feel like we're all teachers and we're all learners here. I mean, none of us are experts in everything. I'm pretty good at California snakes. I am pretty bad at California, mushrooms or Mexican fish. And iNet, what it does is it kind of can mix us all together and allows us to kind of share our knowledge with each other. And I think that's what's really, really cool. iNet started in 2008, and that was when the iPhone was really starting to pick up, along with many other smartphones. And I'm sure all of us, or most of us, have a smartphone in our pocket or next to us right now. Smartphones have a GPS antenna, they have a camera, and they have a data connection to the internet. So it's really easy for anyone with a smartphone to be outside, to take a photo of something and have very accurate location attached to it, accurate time and date, and they can easily just post that to iNaturalist. And so it really kind of democratizes this kind of sharing of observations with robust data and attached to them. And so it's not just you don't have to have like a dedicated camera. You don't have to like try and figure out on a map exactly where you were. That's all kind of taken care of automatically. So I think that's what's really, really powerful. And here's just an example in Wisconsin. I took this screenshot earlier today. There's about 432,000 observations in Wisconsin. You can see kind of a heat map there. Generally, iNat observations match pretty well with population. I'm not too familiar with Wisconsin, but it looks like down toward Milwaukee and the cities, there are more observations and less so in other areas. And of those 432,000 observations, there are about 9,158 species in them. About 17,000 people made those observations, and 8,000 other people added identifications to these observations. And so, we have a total of, I think, about 65 or 66 million observations worldwide. So we've been growing exponentially for the past few years. And so we have this huge worldwide community of people who are just interested in wanting to share and talk about non-human organisms, which I think is really cool. So that's kind of just a basic overview of iNaturalist. I know what a lot of people think of when they think of iNaturalist, especially over the past few years since we introduced it, is our kind of computer vision ID suggestion software. And it's pretty cool. So like I said, we have millions and millions of observations. They've been identified by users. So for the most part, we think a lot of them are accurately identified, although there are definitely mistakes. And especially in a data set this huge with this diverse of a user base, that's going to happen. But I just picked a commonly seen flower in Wisconsin. I'm not too familiar with the botany in your area, but this is a nice, pretty flower. Looks like Trillium grandiflorum. And here's just a few of the photos that have been uploaded to iNat and identified as a species. And basically what we do is we take up to 1,000 photos of a species and we feed them into a machine learning model. And basically we say, okay, here are 1,000 photos. And these are all of the taxon Trillium grandiflorum. And basically it scans all those. It also like flips them and reverses them to sort of like diversify our set of images. And it basically, quote unquote, learns what a photo of Trillium grandiflorum looks like. And so the next time someone submits a photo to the model, it'll look at the photo and it'll say, okay, it looks like this, like other photos of this species. And I really want to emphasize that we're not training it on just on species recognition. We're training to recognize iNaturalist photos of this species. So here are some more photos of the same species on iNat, and you can see there's a huge diversity, right? So we have some close-ups, we have a pink one, we have one with just leaves, we have one with leaves in the background, we have one with this green background where the flowers are tiny, we have this wide shot with a whole bunch of them. And so it's being trained on all of these, and it's going to be looking for photos that look like this. Okay, so this wide one, maybe it won't recognize it in the future, or after it's been trained, because maybe there are a lot of wide photos of white flowers, and it won't be able to get down to species. Or maybe, maybe it's been trained on a bunch of these, close-up shots with the flower, and let's say you submit just leaves, it might not be able to get all the way to species. Another issue is like insects, right? So most photos on iNaturalist are taken in situ, in the wilds. You take a photo of an insect, it's probably on a flower, on a leaf or something. And so that whole background is part of the photo. If we train on iNaturalist photos of a certain species of insect, and then I give it a pinned specimen of that species on a white background with its wing spread, it may not be able to recognize that, even though that pinned specimen has all of the like diagnostic markings, but it may not be able to recognize it because that does not look like any photos of that species on iNaturalist. So we're really training a model to identify pictures that are submitted to iNat, by amateurs, by professionals, mostly in situ. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's not the species that's being recognized, it's iNat photos of the species. And here's just kind of how it works. Here's just someone submitted this photo to iNaturalist. And basically, if you click on the suggest identification, iNat takes a look at the photo, it scans it and runs it through our model. And it says, okay, we're pretty sure it's in this genus. And here are our top suggestions. And right now we're just limiting this to species that have been seen nearby. So that means within about, I believe, 50 kilometers and within 45 days, both before and after the date this observation was made, of any year. So it takes into account both location and seasonality. And it says, okay, here are visually similar species that have been seen nearby, and it kind of orders them in similarity. So, in general, it's quite good at getting the higher taxa, with species and other things. It's a little harder, but it does give you some options to look at. And you could pick that, or you could click on view and look at more photos of it, look at its range, and make a more informed decision. But it does kind of get you started. If you have no idea what you're looking at, it might really, really help you out. May even be correct, but it could just help you out just to start getting an idea of what you've seen. Because a lot of people, especially if they're just new to natural history, may have no idea about family, genus. They don't know what a trillium is versus an orchid or something. And this will help them you can give them that instant feedback of like, okay, I think I may have seen this. What's really cool, and I'll show you a little bit later, is we've been able to put this model into a different app that we call Seek. And if you open the camera and Seek and basically just scan it over anything, it'll start giving you live identification suggestions, just right in the field. And we've kind of made more, and so Seek is sort of this kind of gamified way of looking at nature for more casual users, for people who want to earn badges, and for people who don't want to share their data. Seek is very privacy focused. And especially if it's someone who's just getting into nature and they want to be like, okay, there's a spider in my house. What do you think? What is this spider? Is it going to kill me? What is this cool flower I keep seeing everywhere? They'll get that instant feedback from the model as they're scanning it. And our goal is to help people engage with nature. And this is, I think, one way we can engage more casual naturalists to start looking more closely at the world around them. But like any sort of technology and any sort of tool, it does, you definitely don't want to blindly take the computer vision suggestions. So a few years ago, there was a huge high school competition in Penang, Malaysia, where high schoolers were making iNaturalist observations. It actually almost broke our site. I think they made about 100,000 observations in a day or two. And because our computer vision model is based on iNaturalist data, and we don't have too many users in Malaysia, our model was suggesting all sorts of California species here, because we didn't have the see nearby restriction back then. So basically, if they took a photo, this person took a photo of a tree in Malaysia, and it came back with a very common oak tree in California, And because I'm not exactly sure what they were taught, but because they kind of just blindly accepted it, there were hundreds of observations labeled as coast live oaks in Penang over that day, and other California species. Because again, our model is biased toward the observations that we have, and we start in California, so it will be biased towards those things. And I think hopefully it's a really good lesson to for the kids and for anyone else to not just blindly accept, what a machine tells you, but to kind of just use it as a jumping off point for some critical thinking. And so what happened is that other users had to basically come in and disagree with those identifications, so that our range maps didn't show a whole bunch of California oaks in Malaysia. So again, it all comes down to community. The community is the ones who've added the IDs originally, and they're also helping to correct maybe mistakes made by new users or other users to kind of keep things going on iNaturalist. It takes a huge community around the world, especially, and we have especially very dedicated users who just identify hundreds or thousands of observations a day and just help clean things up on iNaturalist. And hopefully the next model that we're training now will be a lot better in places like Malaysia and Southern Africa, where we're getting a lot more good observations from new users. And we won't be suggesting, it won't be as biased towards maybe California or Texas or New Zealand, where we've had lots of data for many years. So I just kind of want to put that caveat in there. Again, this is pretty new technology, and not only is the technology new, but our responses and the way we think about machine learning and technological interfaces like this, I think there's a lot of education, a lot of ways of thinking that we have to kind of go through to even start thinking about this kind of stuff. And again, I just want to emphasize community. This is really cool. There was a dead fish, a huge sunfish that washed up in California a few years ago. Everyone thought it was, our standard mola mola common sunfish, until someone in Australia saw it, and he's like, you know what? I think this may be this newly described species of sunfish. And he actually tagged someone, Marianne Nygaard, who actually described this new species of sunfish, and she's also on iNaturalist. And she said, you know what, I think that may be right, but none have ever been seen in the Northern Hemisphere lately. And she actually was able to contact some of the people who observed this fish. They went over the next day, took photos of parts of the fish that she needed to see in order to give a positive identification. And she actually was able to positively identify this as this newly described hoodwinker mola. And this was the first known observation of this fish in the Northern Hemisphere since the late 1800s. And since then, they found a lot more of these along California, Oregon, and the Canadian coast, including some older photos people have uploaded since this was found. And they're like, okay, this fish has been seen here for many years before, this one washed up on shore. And so I know one of my, I was asked to talk about technology and identification. And I think, to me, the computer vision is really cool, but the technology that I think is the most important with iNaturalist is really just the connections that it allows and encourages among people all throughout the world. And I think that's what's really powerful about it. So, our data are backed up by our community and by civil evidence-based discussion. And I think that's kind of the heart of why I think it's so powerful. And just one more example, someone in California who knew nothing about insects was gardening and photographed the cicada on the left. And someone is actually revising this cicada genus in the United States. They came across it and they realized that this was probably, I can't remember the exact scientific name, but a species that no one had documented since it was described in 1915. So no one had seen it in over 100 years. And he was able to contact her. They were able to send a cicada expert to the area, and he found a whole population of these that no one had documented. And this kind of discussion between people of all ages, interests, and expertise is, I think, again, what makes iNat so powerful. Just a few more examples of iNat data. Someone someone had actually photographed this weasel in their parents' bathroom in Colombia, and a few years later uploaded to iNaturalist. And the community basically realized that this is not the regular weasel seen in the area. This is the Colombian weasel. There were only, I think, 6 or 7 known specimens, all dead, of this weasel in all of scientific literature. And so these are actually the first photos of a living Colombian weasel that anyone has ever known about. And it's in a bathroom on a toilet in a house outside of Medellin, I believe. And they actually wrote a paper about it. And I think, and another cool new discovery was this new plant was basically discovered via iNaturalist in Mexico. And the authors, they named it after iNaturalist, or Naturalista, which is what we're known in Mexico as, Con Lobos Naturalista. And I wrote a little blog post about this, and they named it after Naturalista because, you know, they were stuck at home during the pandemic. They were able to communicate and share observations and data and meet through iNaturalist. That led to the discussion, that led to the description of this new species. And they said just with just a few clicks, it allowed this kind of collaboration across Mexico to describe this new species, which I think was really powerful. Sorry, my dog's yawning. A few more things. I'm not familiar with this flower, the American trout lily, but it's a big showy flower on the East Coast, Eastern US, I should say. And people like to take photos of it and upload it to iNaturalist. And our co-director, Scott Laurie, made this graph a few years ago. And this is just crunching numbers from iNaturalist observations. This is without any sort of tailored outreach or anything. This is just mining the data that are on iNaturalist. You know, he was able to just kind of discover that it was blooming about 3 weeks earlier in 2016, 2017, compared to the 2 years before that. And, you know, maybe it's not super robust, but this can kind of definitely show us what might be happening in nature and areas where we can really start investigating. You know, why are these blooming earlier? You know, is it a climate thing? Is it something else? So it's really good for detecting trends. And again, this is all just because people were interested in sharing their photos of flowers on iNet. Someone else in Case Western Reserve in Ohio was able to go through thousands of blue dasher dragonfly photos. And during the winter, when he couldn't go out and collect specimens, he was able to match he was able to see that male dragonflies have more translucent wings in hotter areas, and they have more opaque wings in cooler areas. And he was able to map the iNat data with, you know, climate data, figure that out, and then when it was warm enough, collect specimens and actually do a study about why that might be. And, you know, he just had access to, at that point, it was, I think, 13,000 photos of this. There's well over 20,000 photos of this species on iNet now. And so again, even if something common, if you want to upload to iNaturalist, that can actually be really, really important data. iNat's also really good at monitoring invasive species. Here are just all of the garlic mustard observations in Wisconsin. Looks like they're about 1,300, and you can kind of just easily see a map of where they've been seen. You could zoom in if you wanted to and look at more granular data. Someone in New York uploaded this photo of a spotted lanternfly and to iNat, and basically got an email very quickly from New York's Bureau of Invasive Species asking for details, and they went down and actually investigated it. So iNat's being used as kind of a way to detect invasive species and hopefully curtail them before they can spread too much. And also, one was just spotted in Detroit. I think it came in on like on cargo or something. And so these have been seen all the way, I think that's as far west as they've been seen, at least on iNaturalist. And that actually spurred a warning for anyone looking at packages and cargo in Detroit to be on the lookout for these guys. Just some other demonstrations. Some researchers have used iNat to actually look at plant diseases. So they looked at observations of, I can't remember exactly which plant, but this red one here, and they looked for signs of anther smut fungus disease. And people were taking photos of these flowers, and they may not have even noticed that these flowers had disease symptoms on them, but these people went through all the photos, and they were actually able to mine the photo data for disease data and, analyze that. So it's kind of a proof of concept that iNat and other repositories, or not repositories, but sources like iNat can be really good for teasing out, disease interactions and other sort of data. And phenology. So, when a plant is budding, blooming, fruiting, can also iNat can be used for that as well. So this group studied phenology in yuccas in the American Southwest. And they were able to, using iNat data, delineate unique, they were able to delineate extents of unusual flowering events in the yucca just from looking at the flowering data on iNat. And so again, these are, I'm sure no one was actually like collecting these data for this study. This is just like data that people want to take photos of yucca and share them, and they were able to kind of mine these data for that. So there's just a whole lot of information that can be determined from iNaturalist data. That was a lot of me talking. Does anyone have any question? I'm going to stop sharing just for a second. Does anyone have any questions or anything? Looks like no one's typed anything in chat.
Got a question for you, Tony.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What was it like when iNaturalist just started? You said in 2008. Man. So, I mean, was it like a handful of people walking around a campus in California or? So
I actually edited Kenichi's iNaturalist, the original manifesto in 2005. So I actually was even part of it before then. And then I was a test user when it was a master's project at Berkeley. And then I signed up when it started. I'm user number 28. And I honestly don't remember too much about those days. I used it a bit. I added like a sea otter photo I had and a few other things. But it was kind of crazy just to see people just somehow finding it and seeing your observations and adding an ID or a comment. And it was kind of this really kind of little club almost, which I sometimes miss, but I think it's also amazing that we have experts and that people all around the world are using it now. I just I'm not sure if I can describe it much more. It just always seemed like a niche thing, and I don't think any of us expected it to grow as fast as it did, and it's been kind of amazing to watch. Has it just grown on its own, or is there a lot of marketing done to push this out to a greater community? We don't know. It's almost, I think most of our growth is organic. Basically, someone influential in an area finds it and really starts loving it, and they start talking to their friends about it, and then it starts being used. So like we grew in Texas totally organically, just from some really influential people joining iNat, and then it kind of became part of the Texas Master Naturalist program, and now we've got this huge, amazing community in Texas that I visited them a few times. We had in Taiwan, we basically had one professor who translated the whole site into Chinese. He sent us a whole bunch of Chinese common names and conservation statuses to ingest. And then he basically did a whole bunch of talks throughout Taiwan. And he made a whole bunch of guides and how-tos all in Chinese. And we have a huge thriving community there. And we did nothing to do that, really. It's extremely humbling to see people just latch onto this and really make it part of their life and spread it to others. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, there is a question in the chat. If you want to look at that one, I think you were going to talk about iNat on a phone, so maybe you lead into that. I'll just answer these two really quickly. Sure. So most of my screenshots from the phone are from my iPhone. Our Android app looks different. The functionality is basically the same, but the design's a bit different. There was also a lot of screenshots from our website. So we consider our phones to be more of like simple, like what do you need to do when you're in the field? You need to make an observation and look and see what's around you in the field. And so we try to keep those really simple. And the website has a lot more functionality on it, and I'll go into some of that. And as far as design at identify domestic hybrid flowers and plants, it might, we do, so hybrids. So one thing that's really rough is that because we're a global site, we try to maintain a global taxonomy as much as we can, which leads to a lot of discussion and debate. As far as plant hybrids go, we generally don't, because our goal is to help you identify and look for wild organisms around you, and I'll talk about that pretty soon. A lot of like domesticated hybrids or like are not really in iNat. There are other more garden-based apps that I would probably recommend for that. Our focus is really on wild organisms. But you might be able to get like an ID all the way down to petunia. I'm not sure right now. Let me just go through some how-tos, and then I'd be happy to answer more questions. Thank you so much for all the questions, by the way.
I do want to point out Pete has had his hand up for a while, so he wanted to ask a verbal question, but either now or you could call on him later on.
Oh yeah, sorry, Pete. I don't know how to.
No, that's all right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I'm just kind of wondering. I have lots of species that I probably should know, but I don't. Probably pretty common in my area. And even if I learn them, I forget them.
Yeah, me too.
Is there a concern about inundating the system with too many questions, too many pictures saying, this is what I see, can you tell me what it is? And gee, I think I saw this before. Is it the same thing? And how best to approach that?
That's a really good question. So I'm not sure if you're aware of the City Nature Challenge. It's run by people from the California Academy of Sciences here in San Francisco and the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles. And it occurred April 30th through May 3rd. And over 400 cities around the world participated. And we actually had our biggest numbers, I think, was that May 1st or 2nd, whatever that Sunday was, about 400,000 people, about 400,000 observations were uploaded one day, which smashed our record from last year of like, I think 238,000. There's definitely, we definitely have more observations being posted than we have people adding IDs to them. And that was going to be one of my calls at the end, was to say, if you know what things are, please help identify an iNaturalist. I don't think that's a huge concern at the moment. We've been able to kind of grow at a pretty good rate where things, for the most part, get identified. But a lot of it does depend on like which area you're in, like how many people are active in your area, and how many people maybe are experts in that taxon. So for example, for a few years, I'd make observations of hemipterans, like true bugs, and no one would ever identify them. And then, what was it, like 3, 4, 5 years ago, someone from Korea just joined iNaturalist, and he went through almost all the bug IDs and added IDs to almost all the bugs, at least down to family or genus. So you kind of just never know what will happen. I wouldn't worry too much about overloading the system though. You'd have to.
So when in doubt, go ahead and take the picture and post it, and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let me just kind of just show you how. Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pete. Let me show you how iNat works. Share my screen one more time. So. All right, so this is our iOS app. Can you guys all see that?
Yeah, we see it.
Cool. Yeah, so this is kind of and this is actually going to be redesigned pretty soon. Our iOS app's a little old, but basically, there's my number of observations I made, my profile picture, my username, and then a list of my recent observations. If I tap on one of them, see this harrier, you can see I posted 2 photos of it. You can see the location of where it's at. And if I tap on this little kind of discussion icon, you'll see that other people have added identifications to it as well. And that's kind of what the observation looks like on the phone. And you'll see that there are 2 IDs added to it. And there's a little marker of 2 right here. So if I want to make a new observation, and again, it's going to look different in Android, but the principles are basically the same. I would tap observe, this little camera here at the bottom, and I can choose no photo. I can choose to take a picture right now. I can choose to import a photo, and I can choose to record a sound. That's a new feature in iOS, which is pretty cool, especially if you're just out with your phone and you want to observe a bird or like a frog, and there's no way you can photograph it. You can record a sound. But because I don't really want to put my own address on blast, I'm going to go to camera roll. And I'm going to go to my albums. And let's see here. I will pick a plant because I was asked to talk about plants, but this one is not a Wisconsin plant. So I can just choose a plant. If I had maybe a few photos of the same plant, like maybe I had a photo of just the flower and I had one of the leaves, I could pick more than one and I'll add it to the same observation. But this one, I just have one photo. I'll tap add. And you can see I've got the photo here. I can add more photos if I want to by pressing the plus button. I can ask iNaturalist, what did you see? To give me suggestions. I can write a note. And you can see that it imported the date, the time, and the location from my photo. So I don't have to do anything there. As long as you allow your camera to access your location, when you take a photo with your smartphone, it should add that location data to it. Although if you're in an area where it can't really get a good location reading, it may not be able to. So you can see that's all been added into the observation as soon as I made it. Now, what you want to do is you do want to add some sort of identification to your observations. So let's say I uploaded this without an ID. If someone was looking for plants to identify, they would not be able to find this observation because it's kind of in a taxonomic limbo, right? It would not show up if you search for plants because it has no ID attached to it. So it's always good to add some sort of ID. So I'm going to tap on what did you see? It's going to send that photo to iNaturalist. And iNaturalist will say, okay, we're pretty sure it's in this genus. And here are our top suggestions of what's been seen nearby. If I don't like any of these, I could also remove the show nearby suggestions to see just visually similar, regardless of location. But in general, I wouldn't recommend that. So if I'm not sure if I want to go to species, sorry, let me just show. If you tap on the eye, I can actually look at other photos and I can look at a range map. So that's kind of helpful. And that can kind of help me make my decision if I want to. In general, if I don't know, if I'm not sure about the species, I would just choose genus. If I'm not sure about anything here, and this happens to me a lot, like I can look up the species name by typing in here. And let's just say I just want to put, I know it's a plant and I know it's flowering. So I can put flowering plants and I can just tap on that. And now it has some sort of ID. So someone looking for plants will find this observation. But I do know that this is a California fetid addis tongue, so I could add that as well. All right, so I've got my evidence, I've got my ID, I can write notes, I got my date, my time. A few more things to think about is Geo Privacy. So like I said, if I make an observation in my house and I don't really want to know if I don't want anyone to know where I live, or let's say I'm at my friend's house and they don't want me to put their address, publicly, I could tap on Geo Privacy. Let's move this. There's open, there's obscured, and obscured means it puts it in a random box in a 0.2 degree by 0.2 degree area. That's about 28 kilometers squared or so. It's a big area. And I can make it totally private, which I generally wouldn't recommend, but if you want to just make the location totally private, you can do that. I tend to choose obscured if I want to obscure something. So the people know kind of generally where it was seen, and that can help with identification. But this one I'll keep open. And like I said, iNaturalist, our focus is on wild organisms. And by default, all observations are considered to be wild. But let's say you wanted to upload, a tree that you saw that was planted on the sidewalk, or your pet, or your garden plant. You could tap on captive cultivated and put yes. Now there's always going to be gray areas here, but generally something captive or cultivated is there because a human put it there. So that would be pretty much any plant that's been planted by a human, pretty much any pet, a zoo animal. We're really trying to get those kind of things out of the main iNaturalist kind of maps and feed, because people want to look at wild organisms. They don't want to look at pets, and garden plants are not really what iNat's for. And again, you can post them. They won't appear on our range maps, and they won't appear in search results by default, but you can look for them. A few years ago, a whole bunch of students uploaded a bunch of Komodo dragon observations from a zoo here in California, which, they didn't mark them captive cultivated. And all of a sudden, you see that the range of Komodo dragon was Indonesia and California, which, is not accurate and looks really weird. So if you do upload something that's not wild, please mark yes. And that's pretty much it. You can add it to a project, and I can talk about those later, but I wouldn't worry about those right now. And then if I press share, it'll upload. It'll upload my photo, and it'll upload all the other information, and people can start looking at it. Now, if you're out in the wilds and don't have a connection, you can actually turn off automatic upload, which I think is really good. Then you can make the observations. They won't upload while you're out in the field. They'll just kind of be saved in the app. And then when you're home, you can just tap upload, and they can upload via Wi-Fi. And you don't have to worry about maybe burning out your battery or using too much of your data. That's pretty much how our app works as far as making an observation. There's also activity. I could see what people have added comments or IDs to my observations. And I could also explore nearby observations. Let me just move that. So this looks like Berkeley right here. I'm in Oakland. And this is like everything that has been seen recently in Berkeley. I could tap on one and I'd see, okay, it's this. Here's someone saw this tree. Someone saw this mallow. Someone saw this squirrel. And I could see it in a grid view, and I could see it in a list view as well. So it's really kind of cool to just see observations just pop up around you when you use the app. I think it's pretty sweet. So that's pretty much the main points of the app. Let me open up the website real quickly, and then I can show you a little bit of that. Oops. There we go. Why does this thing keep moving? So when you sign in to iNaturalist on our website, we have a little dashboard, and it's a little bit like Facebook, although nowhere near as complicated, and it's not algorithmic, and we're not stealing your data to sell you advertisements. You can follow people, you can follow places, you can follow taxa on iNaturalist. So this is a friend of mine, Eric, and so I can see that he just uploaded this new observation, and I could view it if I want. Here, someone has added an identification to another observation that I added an ID to, so I got updated about that ID. I follow snakes in California, so I'm alerted when someone uploads a photo, observation of a snake in California, so I can go to it and I can look at it. Oh, poor thing, looks like it's dead, and I can add an ID to it. And so this is kind of just like your main dashboard kind of update area. What I think is really, really powerful though, is the Explore tab. So if I click on Explore, it starts off by showing me all observations in the world, all what we call verifiable observations. Verifiable means that it has a photo, a date, a time, sorry, a photo, a date, a location, and it's of a wild organism. And there's about 65 million right now. I could look at it in a map view. I could look at it in a grid view or a list view. And let's say I want to, okay, let's say I want to see, what's been seen in your area. What county, what Wisconsin county should I use?
Portage County would be right in the center of our area
Right.
here.
Portage. So I can go to place, I got Portage County, Wisconsin. The map will zoom down to that county. And it looks like there's about 10,000 verifiable observations in the county. And if I want to, I can see which species have been seen the most. I can see who are the top observers in the area and who have made the most identifications to observations in the area. And that's kind of like a simple overview. And what's cool is I can just keep on filtering if I want to. So let's say I want to visit Portage County next month in June. So I could actually filter and go to months, go to June. And now I can see what's been observed in Portage County in June. And that can kind of give me an idea about, what's seen in this area around this time of year. I could even like just look for, snakes seen in June in Portage County. It's only 5. I could see which species have been active, and I could zoom in more on these if I want to, and click on one. And I could actually just go to that observation itself and look at the photos, look at the IDs that have been added to it, and everything like that. So it's pretty powerful. There's all sorts of different things you can look for. Like I said, I like using it for planning trips. So I can kind of just see what's been seen at a certain place at a certain time. But there's all sorts of ways you can use it. This is just kind of a very basic overview. And what's cool is that if I want to kind of really analyze data, I could click on filters and I can go to download. And basically I can download a CSV document, or basically like a spreadsheet of all of these observations. And then I could open it up in another program and manipulate and analyze the data however I want to. So that's pretty powerful stuff. And let's see, I can just clear this. And I'll just go back to pretty much every observation. I'm sorry about my cat. Another really, really great tool that, if you guys are knowledgeable about any sort of tax in your area, that I think it's really, really vital to add identifications to people's observations. So we have an identify page. If you click on that, by default, and it takes a moment to load because we have a lot of observations, it's going to show you the most recent observations that need an ID. So basically, because iNat is community focused, we want the community to agree on an ID for an observation, and then it becomes what we call research grade, which is a bit of a misnomer. All it means is that it's identified to species by more than 2/3 of our community. And we share those research grade observations with the Global Biodiversity Information Facility every week. And that's this huge repository that gets our data, eBird data, all sorts of data, and anyone can kind of just use that data as a central kind of location for their research. Okay, so this is going to be all the most recent observations uploaded to iNaturalist. I probably won't know most of them. So let's say I want to actually focus down to something I know. So I'm pretty good at stuff in California. So I can choose California here. And it should switch to just the newest observations in California. I could filter further by taxon or anything else if I wanted to. But what I can do is I can just click on this and I see the photo, I see the map, I see the date, the time, and I could add an ID if I wanted to. Looks like they already have, but what they did was they added a placeholder. They didn't actually attach it to our taxonomy. So what I can do is I can just press I. I know this is a white fairy lantern. I could type that in. Ooh, actually it's this I go globally, same thing. I could click on it, and now that identification is attached to our taxonomy, and I like to be polite and just include their placeholder. Press save. Now you can see it's been identified as white globally. And I can just press the right arrow, go to the next one. And I can kind of just go through these until I see one that I know. So I know this is a desert globe mallow. And if I just press A, you'll see that it says needs ID right now. Now that more than 2/3 of the community has agreed at a species level, it's now we call research grade. So it's really easy to go through observations and kind of add your identifications to them. And like I said, it really helps out a lot, especially with someone new. A lot of people say, like, when I uploaded my photo and all of a sudden someone I didn't even know helped me out, that kind of really, really gets them into iNaturalist and wanting to make more observations. At least that's a lot of anecdotal data that I've heard. And those are kind of the main things I wanted to go over: the explore page, identify page. I did want to do one more thing, and I'm sorry about this. I didn't show you our Seek app, and then I'm happy to take questions after that. So this is our regular iNaturalist app. You'll see on the left. Our Seek app is the one that kind of gives you live identification suggestions, and it's more like a game. So it takes your kind of your general location. It'll show you what's been seen nearby, and I can actually tap on one of these. I can see where it's been seen around me, and I can see what time of year it's been seen around me. So I kind of can seek it out if I want to. But really what people really like about Seek is if I tap on the little green camera here, it opens up the camera. And let me just see if I can just close this a little bit. Okay, so on the left is the camera. On the right here is California flower. And if I just hold this up there, it'll start going to family. If I kind of tap on it to focus, it'll get me all the way to species. It'll say, this is an elegant Clarkia. If I take a photo, I get a new badge because I've now found 5 plants, and it tells me I've just observed this new species. So it's really our way to reach out to people who are kind of more interested in kind of making nature observation a game. And if you're just kind of like starting out, it's pretty cool. And I can kind of go back and look at my, I can look at my achievements. So I can see which badges I've earned, and I can see which observations, species I've seen. So a lot of people really like Seek, especially with kids and families. And it's a lot of fun to just kind of just like move the camera over something and let it and watch it work. Sometimes it's not right. Sometimes it is. But yeah, I think this is the turtle at first, and then it goes, oh, wild turkey. So it's a really fun thing, especially if you don't want to share your location with other people or join in a social network. It's a good way to kind of just get quick IDs when you're out in nature and have some fun doing it. All right, I will stop sharing my screen right now, but I'm happy to share it again if I need to explain something, but I'm happy to answer some questions. Great. Judy and Tom, did was that enough of the app that I showed you? Hope so.
No, I was really confused. I was just
Oh, really?
expecting you to go through all the details on the Seek app. That's what
Oh.
I thought this was. So I'm at the wrong place.
Oh, no, I mean, I did go through Seek a little bit. Did you have any other questions about it?
It's way too confusing for me.
Oh, really?
I guess I'm going to have to use it a little more to figure it out. That's all. Sorry, this was way beyond me. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just in the wrong place.
And I can show a little bit more, but Seek is a separate app. Yeah. So it's been tough to message this, but iNaturalist, like I've said, is a social network. And it's about sharing what you've seen. And there are a few issues with that, right? One is that every observation you make is basically a public record of where you were on a time and date. And not everyone wants to do that. Not everyone can share that information. So anyone under 13 cannot have their own iNaturalist account without our obtaining their parents' permission. So there are some privacy issues as far as that goes. And also iNaturalist does involve kind of a lot of, it can involve like a lot more effort because you're interacting with other people. You can discuss things with them. It's a lot more complicated. We wanted to make Seek as an alternative for people who don't want to or can't share their data online. So Seek doesn't share data. It all stays in the app unless you choose to share it to iNaturalist, but it's not really meant for that. It's really meant to be on your phone, and you just kind of taking photos and observing new species just within the app. It's not really a data collection app. iNaturalist is a social network where people want to share and discuss what they've seen. So they're kind of two separate things, but because they are sort of connected in some ways, it is a bit confusing. Someone asked, what free app would you suggest for identifying flowers? I honestly, I don't have a garden. I live in a condo, unfortunately. There are, so a lot of, if you go to the App Store, a lot of apps advertise in iNaturalist search results, and a lot of them are paid ones. There's one called Picture This, which I think charges like $30 a year. I wouldn't choose that one, especially if you want a free app. There's, I think, some other ones called Plant Snap, and I can't remember the other one. There are a few free ones that I would check out. Just make sure that when you're in one of the app stores, that you make sure there's no like in-app purchases or kind of sneaky subscription stuff, because a lot of them, those apps do have that. Where iNaturalist is totally free. We don't charge for anything. We're very lucky to be supported by some organizations and to have donations from our users that help us. So yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't answer that in more detail. But I know there are a few that I think get pretty highly rated in the app stores. And I know Plant Snap is one of those. How do we use the Android app? Unfortunately, I can't really hook up my Android app to my computer to kind of show you the screen. It's basically the same. The principles are the same of like, you want to make a new observation. You can choose to like import a photo. You can choose to make a new photo if you want. And it'll take your date and your location, and you can add an ID to it. And the principles are all the same. It's just a bit more, it's just looks a little bit different. The layout's a bit different. We have a little how-to that I can post in chat. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm on a Mac, and I think I can only mirror my iPhone on this computer, unfortunately. But our getting started guide that I'm going to post has instructions, kind of basic instructions for using our website and our iPhone app and our Android app. So that should be able to get you started.
Tony, there were a couple of questions before just about kind of being confused about the app and Seek versus iNaturalist. Would it be fair to say that both apps are very useful for coming to an identification, but Seek is more instantaneous, computer generated?
Yeah.
Take a picture of something and it'll tell you right now what it thinks it is, but there's no community-based ground truthing, if you will, of that image.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. So Seek, so when I showed you iNaturalist, it'll show you a list of possibilities. Seek only shows you, because it only can give you kind of one idea at a time, it's pretty conservative. So sometimes it won't even give you a species ID, because it's like, you know what, we're not sure enough that it's this species, so we're going to maybe keep it a genus or family, which I think is also really, really helpful. And yes, there's no way in Seek to get kind of feedback from other people. Whereas with iNaturalist, yes, the point of iNaturalist is like, you share it and other people will chime in on it, and they can help you out. Yeah, and if you want to contribute data to the broader community, then you want to use iNaturalist. That's a really good way of delineating it, Paul.
All right, this is Pete again, and following up on that, that's what my question was about. So if I'm out bumbling around and wondering what something is, maybe give Seek the first try, and if it gives, that can give me an obvious answer and said, well, geez,
Yes.
I should have known that.
Yeah.
But if it gets a bit more complicated, or if I don't get a good answer from Seek, or if I want to share the information, do I jump over to iNaturalist, or is there a connection between Seek and iNaturalist saying, well, Seek didn't do it for me. Check this out in iNaturalist.
Yes. Basically, when you make a new, so when you open up Seek, you can sign into an iNaturalist account or make one. And when you make a new observation in Seek, you can then post and it doesn't have to be a species. So let's say you take a photo, let's say Seek is like, we're pretty sure it's in this family. You take a photo and you can actually share it to iNaturalist from within Seek. But that sharing is only one way. So once it's shared to iNaturalist, you won't get any feedback in Seek. You'd have to go to iNaturalist and see what people say about your observation in iNaturalist. Yeah, that's so. Yes, there is a connection. It's not meant to be like. You also can't upload like old observations from Seek to iNaturalist. You can only do it like when you make a brand new observation. You'll see an option there, and you can share it to iNaturalist at that point. If you have old ones in Seek, you can't share them to iNaturalist, unfortunately. So yeah, but yeah, if you're kind of just wandering around, you want to know what something is, I would definitely try Seek on it. Hopefully we'll have a new recognition model out in the next few months that I think will be probably better for Wisconsin and other areas where we've had less data. So I think it should be greatly improved in the next few months with its suggestions.
So there's a question to you. Do I start with Seek for my own information or start with our iNaturalist with the idea of sharing anything I might bumble across?
I'm probably biased because I've been using iNat for a long time and Seek is pretty new, but I would maybe start with iNaturalist because I think it's really cool to kind of get that community feedback. But I do know a lot of people start out in Seek and they realize how much fun they're having and how they want to know more. And they eventually start using iNaturalist more than they do Seek. Because Seek is because Seek doesn't share much data, we actually know very little about Seek users aside from what they tell us because we collect almost no data from it. With iNat, we kind of know where people are and who's been using it, but Seek is really, really privacy focused. So I'm just kind of telling you anecdotal stuff. Because I answer our help emails, I do get a lot of emails from people who are like using Seek and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I want to start using iNaturalist. So that does happen. Other than that, I can't really give you like a clear answer. I would just say try one and maybe try Seek first just because it does give you that kind of immediate feedback and it's really fun. And if you find yourself kind of wanting more, then definitely I would try out iNaturalist and kind of see what kind of responses you get. One thing that's really interesting that you kind of learn, especially as you photograph plants, is that you want to get a few parts of the plant in your observation. And so that's one thing Seek isn't as good at because a lot of times you need the flower and you need the leaves, or you might need the side of the flower and the leaves. And so the fact that iNaturalist can accept multiple photos of an organism allows for a lot more accurate and precise identification. One thing that I think is so important to learn when you're becoming a naturalist is that, and something it took me a long time to learn, is that we want to get the species a lot, but there's so much about, it's so important to realize what we can and cannot know and understand without the right evidence. And I think that's sort of what we try to teach you with our apps and our community is that, like, it's okay to just get to the genus of something, because a lot of times if you take a photo of a spider, you can get to maybe understand what genus or family it is, but unless you have a microscope and can take a picture of its genitals, that's about as far as you can get. And so I think just any sort of kind of new kind of curiosity or new kind of awareness and knowledge that you get is really important as you kind of become more of a naturalist. I kind of went off on a tangent there, I'm sorry. But I hope I answered your question, Pete, about which one to maybe try out first.
No, I think that was good. And again, I downloaded both apps and
Yeah.
and I've done similar apps, and I'm just wondering how to use them and which ones to use. And again, sometimes I'm just, you know, I see a spider and I want to shoot it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what is it? Other times, you know, I got a good shot of the spider. Maybe this one I would share. So I guess the question is, do you have to be an iNaturalist and take the photo, or can I take a photo and upload it to iNaturalist?
Yeah, so like I showed in my demonstration, I made a new observation and I just imported a photo that was already on my phone into iNaturalist. And you can do the same thing in Seek as well. If you have a photo on your phone, you can import it into the app. I am like, looks like I'm just Dana. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. You said that you take a lot of pictures as you go, and when I have more time, I'll upload into iNaturalist. That's actually the way I tend to use the app. Is if I have my phone with me, I just take a photo or multiple photos if I need to. Especially if I'm out in the field, I sometimes don't want to just deal with entering all that information in the app, especially if I don't have like a cell phone connection. So I'll just take photos. And because I have set my camera to record my location, I can just import those photos into iNaturalist or Seek later. And then I can kind of figure it out from there. When I'm in the field, I want to kind of just be in the field and really kind of just be into, you know, where I am at the moment. And so I kind of use my phone just as a way to take photos. And then when I'm kind of at home, and maybe if I have some field guides with me, I can kind of use those to help identify things and upload them at my own pace. So that's one thing. That's one way you can use it. Some people really like just using the app in the field and just like getting down their notes and getting the precise location right then and just kind of using it then. So it kind of depends on what you want to do. I personally just like taking photos and doing all that when I'm at home. Any other questions or comments? No?
Well, thanks so much, Tony, for presenting for us. This was a really interesting talk. I had heard of iNaturalist and was fairly familiar with it, I thought, but there's so much more to it that I didn't realize, and I had actually never heard of Seek before. So thank you very much.
Cool.
I downloaded Seek as we were in the meeting today, so I'm going to have some fun with that one.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
like
a lot
to
of
thank
people,
you too, and
especially during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you too in that I was wondering about the differences, and I have a better understanding, and yeah, looking forward to giving it a try. Again, Wisconsin, you're in California, but it seemed like there's a fair number of hits here in Wisconsin, Portage County. I find that encouraging. So I say thank you for doing all this.
Sure. No, I'm happy to talk to anyone about iNat. I just want to thank you guys for giving me your time. And thanks for the feedback. I think Seek and iNat that's a messaging thing we are just continuing to work on to try and figure out exactly how to describe both apps and which uses they might be best for. So that's been really interesting to me as well. And thank you so much, everyone. I really do appreciate it. And have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tony. And I'll just remind everybody that our June meeting is on June 8th. We have Jess Miller from Mosquito Hill talking about insects and relationships with native plants. So join us again for that. And with that, have a great night, everybody, and we'll see you again in June.